I have a sweater. I have already
Good evening. It's really nice to see all of you here in person. We're really excited as a league to be able to return to a hybrid, partially in-person forum, and welcome also to those who are joining us on Zoom. My name is Leslie Kuhn, and I am the president of the League of Women Voters of Newcastle. On behalf of our league, I'd like to welcome you and our candidates to the Candidates Forum for the Newcastle Town Board term unexpired, expiring in December 2025 election. It's a mouthful. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan grassroots political organization of women and men. This means that the League does not support or oppose one candidate or political party over another. We are dedicated to the active and informed participation of citizens in government at all levels. The League works to educate voters, increase understanding and debate on major issues, and influence policy through education and advocacy. The League takes positions on policies, not on candidates or parties. To that end, during this election, New Yorkers will have the opportunity to vote on proposal number 1, the Clean Water, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act of 2022. This ballot measure will provide funding to safeguard drinking water, update New York's infrastructure, conserve wildlife habitats, and strengthen New York's economy. The League has taken a position on this proposal and urges you to flip your ballot over and vote yes on proposal number 1, the Environmental Bond Act. You can find more information about the League, including how to join and support our work, at our website, www.lwvnewcastle.org. Our website also has a page dedicated to this election season, where you can find a link to Vote 411, which has information submitted by the candidates you will find on your ballot. You should also, if you're a Newcastle resident, have received a postcard from us with QR codes that will take you to Vote 411 and to the Westchester County Citizen Participation website, where you can find information about important dates and polling places. We're really pleased that both candidates for the town board term are participating in tonight's educational forum. We're excited to be able to offer in-person attendance tonight. We are also committed to providing an educational experience for all voters who want to learn about our 2 candidates. As a reminder, to ensure that we cover as many topics as possible and to provide all community members with the opportunities to submit questions for the candidates, all questions for tonight's forum come from advanced submissions. We thank the many community members who submitted questions to our committee. The committee worked hard to identify the range of topics that were of interest to the community and compile a list of questions to cover those topics. There will not be an opportunity for questions from either our live or virtual audience tonight. We also ask that those of you here in person hold your applause until the end of the forum so that we can get through all of our questions asked and answered, and so that the online experience is not compromised. This evening's proceedings are being taped by Newcastle Community Media Center and are being live streamed on YouTube. Thanks to Carrie Krams for facilitating. The recording will be available on demand at nccmc.com and on YouTube after the forum. All other recording is strictly prohibited. Any public sharing or rebroadcast of this candidates forum must be in its entirety and unedited. American Sign Language interpretation and live closed captioning in English and Spanish are available for the online viewing of tonight's forum and also behind me. LWV Newcastle collaborated with Disability Rights New York to provide these accessibility features, and we thank them for their services. For those participating on Zoom, To see the closed captions, you can click the 3 dots button on your bottom bar labeled More. Choose Captions and Show Captions. You can also choose View Full Transcript to see the transcript in a window on the side. Alternatively, by going to the website listed there, you can view the captions in stream text in your web browser. From there, you will be able to get live captions in English and Spanish. Thanks very much to our timekeeper tonight, Horace Greeley High School senior and LWV Newcastle intern, Ryan Tribal. Many thanks to our moderator for this evening, John Hessel, a member of the League of Women Voters of New Rochelle. John will now go over the ground rules for tonight's forum.
Thank you, Leslie. Not just from women, by the way. Thanks, and an honor to be here in accordance with the league policy. I'm not a voter in the district here. So the order of the opening statements has been determined by a coin flip before the meeting. The order of the closing statements will be in the reverse order as the opening statements. The order in which the candidates will respond to further questions will be rotated by me to assure fairness. Throughout the forum, no comments of a personal or abusive nature will be permitted. The moderator will rule this out of order. Each candidate has up to 1.5 minutes for their opening statement. They will then answer a set of questions, 10 or 12 questions submitted by the public and organized by the league. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. The timekeeper, Ryan, will indicate when 1 minute remains, when 30 seconds remain, and when time is up. Each candidate is entitled to 2 30-second rebuttals. Questions, of course, were submitted to prior to this night by email and electronic form. The audience is not able to ask any questions. At the end of the question period, each candidate will give a closing statement of approximately 1.5 minutes. You have 1.5 minutes for that. As a moderator, I will reserve the right to allow a rebuttal of the close if warranted by the content of the closing statements. That rebuttal would be given 30 seconds. Please hold all applause during the forum and conduct yourselves with the proper decorum that your candidates in town deserve. If necessary, I will pause the forum and or clear the room. Now we will proceed with the forum for the Newcastle Town Board with the term expiring in December 2025. We have 2 candidates vying for the seat. In alphabetical order, your candidates are Christian Hildebrand and Holly McCall. And Ms. McCall has the first opening statement. So when you're ready, Ms. McCall, you can begin.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Mr. Hessel, for being a moderator, and to Ryan, the timekeeper, and to the League of Women Voters for bringing us together tonight. Thank you so much to everyone who's watching online or sitting here with us, and a very happy Diwali to those who are celebrating tonight. At this critical time, not only in our country and our state, but also in our town, this may be one of the most important elections since I've lived in this town. My values, transparency, accountability, and commitment have defined my life and what I represent. The residents will have a decision between the 2 of us for where we stand and what we believe in for the future of our town. I stand up for transparency and accountability, while the current town board has been participating in the opposite behind closed doors. I stand up for our families and all residents who want to feel part of our local government, while I feel the current board has been making the board less transparent. I stand up for planning for our future and investing in our beloved Newcastle, rather than advocating for incremental changes with no vision. I look forward to your questions this evening and future discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Brian. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring tonight's event. The work you do is essential, and of course, happy Diwali to anyone who's celebrating. I also want to thank Holly. If you remember last year when we met while campaigning on Election Day, I said to your boys and your parents how proud they should be of you, and rightly so. Thank you to the voters. Whether you support me or whether you support Holly, this town has incredibly engaged and informed residents, and that's a wonderful thing. So why do I want to do this? Don't really know, but I love Newcastle, plain and simple. I've lived here 24 years, which is longer than any other place in my life. I've raised my kids here, coached hundreds of others, but I've never been a political person. I've been content to focus on my family, my friends, my work, volunteer efforts, But last year, we all woke up and saw the real potential for lasting bad decisions to be made by our previous town board that would have had negative impact on our community and the future of our town. The form-based code and the environmental review that it was built upon would have paved the way for unfettered development throughout Chappaqua Hamlet. I joined the USC team last year as part of their election campaign to stop that runaway train. Our opponents, including Holly, fully supported it and ignored the input of hundreds of residents and our planning board. In the end, we won and were able to reset our focus on development, engagement, and preserving what makes this town so special. And that's my sole goal, my only ambition, to serve neighbors here in Newcastle. Since January, I've rolled up my sleeves and tried to do the best job possible for all of you, and that's what I'll continue to do if I'm elected.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hildebrand. Okay, here's the first question, and we're gonna start with you, Mr. Hildebrand. We appreciate your willingness to put yourself forward to serve our community. Why are you uniquely qualified to sit on the town board? How will you be an asset to the community?
Thank you. So I think, part of what makes someone well suited to this position is a combination of their background, the skill sets they bring to the table, but also their disposition. And I think that, my career, I've had, multiple lives, if you will. I spent 12 years as a practicing attorney at the highest level. And for the last 15 years, I've helped build a number of investment management firms and help run critical functions there. So I think that mix of skill sets, brings a lot to bear. And in the 10 months that I've been on the town board, I've been able to call upon and utilize almost all of them, amazingly so, more than I could have expected. But I also think demeanor, the ability to collaborate, and the ability to focus on what's important. And in this role, what's important is serving the 18,000 residents of Newcastle. That's what I've tried to do. I've tried to be a voice of reason. I've tried to be as diligent as I could be to understand all the issues and to take an active role in participating in the management of our town. And the ability to collaborate, I think, is critical. We have an incredible staff here, headed by Jill Shapiro, our amazing town administrator. And so understanding our role, which is to set policy where necessary, but ultimately to stay out of the way, to let the incredible talented staff do their job. And to me, that's a combination of skills that I do bring to the table.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McCall?
Thank you for that question. What makes me uniquely qualified, I think, is a combination of my experience and my character. As far as my experience goes, I have a background in project management in financial services. So I have a good understanding of the way that finances are working, as well as solving a problem and getting to a delivered end. That includes planning, foresight, and execution. And I've done that not just in my professional life, but also in my personal activist life when I advocated with a bipartisan group in Congress to have a law changed, I should say, a regulation changed to ensure that all stay-home parents have fair access to credit. I have experience on the Board of Education in Chappaqua School District. That is a larger budget than the town has, so that type of oversight and fiduciary responsibility I also have. I have a calm approach to problem solving. I don't think I fluster all that easily, and I practice active listening, and I know that there were some concerns about how much I was listening last year, but everyone should know I heard absolutely everything, which is why I know what the community does not want.
Okay, thank you. The question goes to you then, Ms. McCall. What do you think the biggest challenge is to our town now and in the next few years?
That is also an excellent question. I think right now the biggest challenge that we have is establishing a vision for our future and planning to achieve that vision. The last year was spent getting rid of something that had taken a lot of money, a lot of time, and now we need to figure out how we're going to move forward. So I think that it's important that as a community, we develop the vision, take out what we know we don't want, and establish plans to understand our new parking situation. Commuting is definitely different, so I think we need to study parking and zoning, especially in the North Greeley corridor. And then achieve those plans through action, policy setting, and enthusiasm.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hildebrand.
Sure. So I think the town board, as in most cases, has a fairly limited mandate. And I think for me, first and foremost, I sort of look at this almost like a municipal Hippocratic oath, do no harm. So I want to focus on continuing to move Newcastle forward with incremental positive change. I think you heard my opponent say that she's opposed to incremental change. Well, I'm a big believer in incremental positive change. I think our town is great. I think it was never broken to begin with. So for me, focusing on development is a huge area where I think given the energy that the community put into the discussion about the form-based code last year, we have a real opportunity to strike while the iron's hot. Engagement is high. We've got a potential proposal on North Greeley that I think could be fantastic. We've already done some things at the town board level, like adding an affordable housing component throughout the hamlets, adding some below street level housing, which was low hanging fruit for infill development. And I want to explore other ways to increase that, potential units in the business and business retail district that again could add housing stock without transforming the hamlet's footprint. And I think honestly, we need to move past divisiveness. We need to move past Facebook debates and nastiness and churlishness that we see all too often, and work together. We have, as I said, an amazing town staff. So that's really my priority, and I think I want to continue to do the work that I've done the last 10 months with the town board.
Okay, thank you. This one is to you, Mr. Hildebrand. In the last election, the form-based code was a major topic of interest for many residents. What is your view on what has happened with the downtown development since that election, and what would you advocate for regarding downtown development moving forward?
Sure. So, to me, development, kind of takes a variety of shapes and sizes. There's sort of large scale, master planning, what I would call kind of future town vision development. That's what we saw last year. And then the question of engagement with residents is sort of how and when. That issue last year was in the extreme, and I thought that process and policy were deeply flawed from the get-go. And I think, for something as transformative as the form-based code, in a community like Newcastle, that should have been precipitated by massive outreach. So if the board were ever determined to do something with town property, I would want that to be a much more collaborative and engaged process. I think what we've done so far, again, are fantastic incremental steps, establishing a 10% floor on affordable housing, and then adding some infill development that is something the comprehensive plan spoke to specifically. I think are wonderful ways to continue to move Newcastle forward. I think if we see properties like North Greeley and certain other properties in town that are underutilized or frankly underused entirely, that's really what we need to see. And then in the end, obviously the goals of a comprehensive plan to add additional housing, diversity of housing, and to keep the town's bucolic and natural charm, and also to create vitality are still the critical goals. And I'm delighted after 10 months on the board to see, frankly, the town thriving. And that's all we need to do is to sort of stay out of the way and continue to push it in the right direction.
Thank you. Ms. McCall?
Would you mind repeating that
Sure.
question?
In the last election, the form-based code was a major topic of interest for many residents. What is your view on what has happened with downtown development since that election, and what would you advocate for regarding downtown development moving forward?
Thank you. So I want to be clear, in my eyes, the form-based code is gone. It is not something that even comes to my mind unless somebody else is bringing it up. I think the question now is just about moving forward. As far as what's happened, I'm glad to see some new businesses have opened up. That's always very exciting. I feel that since I've been here, I've seen more businesses close than open on the net, so I would really like to make sure that we don't declare victory quite yet. I'm still concerned about the North Greeley corridor. I know that there's a proposal, but there's still a moratorium. There's nothing that has happened, and I'm not clear yet on what is gonna happen, and I think that that does need to be a priority for us as a town board to make sure that we understand what the vision is on North Greeley in particular, and then spread that out through the rest of the hamlets the town. But again, we do need to have a publicly engaged process where the vision is shared between the town board, the policymakers, and all of the residents.
Okay, thank you.
May I use a rebuttal?
You can use a rebuttal.
Thank you.
30 seconds.
So we keep hearing that the form-based code is gone, but 11 months ago you ran as a full-throated supporter of the form-based code. It was a core of your campaign. And then a few months after that, we were faced with an issue where Albany was trying to impose statewide a mandate that would have done as much or more damage to towns like Newcastle than the form-based code. And I was proud at the town board level that several of us, a majority, took a stand against that and stated it publicly. I didn't hear your voice in that debate, and I know a lot of your supporters and several of your running mates last year were also full-throated supporters. So to me, issues about development and judgment are always on the
Okay,
ballot.
thank you very
Thank you.
much.
May I use?
Absolutely, 30 seconds.
I keep hearing that I was a full-throated, strong supporter of the form-based code, and that's actually not the reality. I was very, very reserved about it at the beginning and only became comfortable as the town board reduced the scope to just the North Greeley area, which I felt was an urgent area that needed attention. I just wanted to straighten out the record on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here's our next question, and it's gonna go to you, Ms. McCall. Last year, there was an accessory dwelling unit proposal. This year, there is a proposal for transit-oriented development legislation as part of the state budget process. What is your view on this proposed legislation, and how would you as a town board member advocate for the interests of our town with respect to this and other federal or state legislation impacting local zoning?
Okay, that was a mouthful.
Do you want the question again?
Could you please?
Yeah, sure. Last year, there was an accessory dwelling unit proposal. This year, there is a proposal for transit-oriented development legislation as part of the state budget process. What is your view on this proposed legislation, and how would you as a town board member advocate for the interests of our town with respect to this or other federal or state legislation impacting local zoning?
Okay, thank you. I think that was actually both this year, to just kind of clarify that. I know that Newcastle has a accessory dwelling unit ordinance, and I think that that is wonderful. I do wish that the rest of the communities in the state were as open and welcoming to that, and not driving the federal or the state level to try to impose zoning rules on towns. So I would love to see our community address or review our ADU legislation. And I did not support the transit-oriented development as it was presented in the budget. I did not have a platform to fight with anyone at the state level to argue why that was not an appropriate step for the state. But I believe that the response was made and that was taken out of the budget. I think relationships with our state representatives and leaders is crucial, and I will continue to nurture those and advocate with everyone as appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hildenbrand?
I hate to do this, but
Okay. I got it. This is quite a question. Last year,
short-term memory, sorry.
Last year, there was an accessory dwelling unit proposal. This year, there is a proposal for transit-oriented development legislation as part of the state budget process. What is your view on this proposed legislation, and how would you as a town board member advocate for the interests of our town with respect to this or other federal or state legislation impacting local zoning?
So Holly's absolutely correct, they were both this year, just for the record. I would advocate the way I advocated back in the spring, publicly and forcefully. There were voices in town, again, many of the same folks who either ran with or supported Holly last year, and even some in town government who said, we need to get on board, this train's leaving the station. This is the wave of the future, we don't wanna ruffle any feathers, we need to be cooperating with our local officials. And frankly, I didn't agree with that. I thought we needed to take a stand, and I'm so proud that we did. We joined with other municipalities, people from across the political divide, and we expressed our voice. And to me, that was a critical moment. Again, that would have done more damage to our town than the form-based code. It was blunderbuss, it was broad-based, it had no nuance whatsoever. So that's how I would handle it in the future. I think we have an opportunity in limited cases to advocate where state or national issues have an impact on Newcastle and we have an ability to do something about it. I think when you go beyond that, we start to get into posturing and pontificating, and I think that we have enough division in our society as it is that we should focus on what we can accomplish here in Newcastle. And so when and as needed, I think we should advocate and we should have a public voice, but only when and as needed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this question goes to you, Mr. Hildenbrand. What are your thoughts on development in the Millwood Hamlet? What actions can the town board take to facilitate any necessary infrastructure improvements for development to occur, such as sewer hookups?
So, the issue of development and to be very clear, the debate last year was about the Chapel Hamlet. But Millwood is obviously an equally important part of Newcastle, as are the West End and Kisco Park and the East End and so forth. So to me, we have to think about all of these issues the same way. What's appropriate for the scale and scope of the hamlet? When it comes to infrastructure, sewer connections in Millwood would potentially change the nature of that hamlet. And I know a lot of residents are concerned that that could pave the way to much larger scale development. Parts of the West End obviously are incredibly environmentally sensitive, so we need to be acutely aware of that when we think about future development. There are properties in Millwood that I think could be perfect for potential residential development. We had a proposal earlier this year for the lumberyard, which is interesting, but would need to be considered again. Waste management would be very complicated given the current infrastructure. There's a huge cost element to it as well. We would have to create a new sewer district, which would potentially result in a tax on those residents. So, I think all of those things need to be weighed and considered. And again, for me, anything that approaches the scale of development that would require new infrastructure would need to involve significant input from those residents.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. McCall?
I'm glad you asked because I was talking with some residents out in the Millwood and West End area very recently. And I have actually gotten more of the sense that they would like to see sewers to enable either residential connections or more commercial businesses within that area. So I actually think that we should be exploring more aggressively, not only for potential future growth in the Millwood area, but also for just the environment, to be limiting the number of septic systems that we have, the new septic systems. We're coming on a really great opportunity with the federal infrastructure bill, as well as I hope that the Environmental Bond Act is gonna pass. And there are gonna be additional monies available for infrastructure improvements such as sewers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question goes to you, Ms. McCall. Is Westchester County doing enough to ensure that Westchester County Airport operates as a good neighbor to Newcastle, particularly from an environmental standpoint? What is your view on Newcastle's role in the airport master planning process?
Can you repeat the meat of that again?
Is Westchester County doing enough to ensure that Westchester County Airport operates as a good neighbor to Newcastle, particularly from an environmental standpoint? What is your view on Newcastle's role in the airport master planning process?
So I think that we have done a really good job as a community of advocating for ourselves as well as our representatives on the airport master plan. I think that we need to take a few more steps and also ensure we're being a good neighbor to our neighboring communities in finding alternative flight paths that work for everyone. I also think that we need to be advocating not just with the county but also with our federal partners when it comes to the airport, because as I think everybody probably knows, the airport is not just on the county. This has got a lot of hands in it. And absolutely, the master plan needs to address, without a question, the implications to air, water, and our health and the environment. I think that is absolutely not optional.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hildenbrand.
Thanks. So the airport is a critical issue for our community and mostly for North Castle and Mount Pleasant in particular. I do think the county, especially this year, has engaged in a really open and collaborative process. I think that the forums that they've hosted in some ways are kind of a model of good government. I was happy to attend as a representative of Newcastle, but also as a resident of Chappaqua that has a home right under the landing path on Route 120 and 117, to attend a forum at Mercy College in June, and then again at the Chapac just about 6 weeks ago, and to speak out on behalf of our community. I think it's very important to make our voices heard at this critical juncture. The fact is the airport never would be built today, impossible. It's the third largest or busiest airport in New York State. It's nestled next to a watershed and a reservoir that serves 10 or 11 million people. And frankly, when I moved here in 1998, there were occasional commercial flights that flew over, flights to Palm Beach, flights to Chicago, and so forth. Now almost 90% of the air traffic is private. Those planes are bigger. The emissions have gotten more substantial. And ultimately, we don't even know what the consequences are from an environmental standpoint. So I think that's a critical issue from a quality of life perspective, from an environmental perspective. And I think the county, is being open and listening, but the proof's in the pudding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This one starts with you, Mr. Hildenbrand. Thinking about the town budget, what do you believe should be the priorities now and in the next few years?
So we just went through the budget process, 2-day budget process. What week is it? Was it last week? I guess it was last week. I can't remember anymore. We're going to be about $40,000 below the tax cap. So that's a razor thin margin. The school board is considering a very significant bond. As it currently stands, about 70+% of every dollar residents of the Chappaqua Central School District pay in taxes go toward the school board. So residents are already maxed out when it comes to taxes. And so we need to be razor sharp when it comes to our budget. This is the time to start to tighten our belts. We're going to probably be in a recession at some point in the near term. Inflation's in the high single digits, if not higher. Interest rates are going up and they're not likely to come down anytime soon. So really prudent, smart fiscal management is going to be critical in the next few years. And so I think that's really going to be a major focus for the town board especially.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McCall.
So you guys actually did the budget the week before last.
Losing track.
I know, time flies. Right now, I think that we have, as a community, done a really good job about managing our budgets, staying below the tax cap. And I do hope that a likely coming recession does not impact our ability to do that. As far as what I think the priorities should be is, continuing to be as efficient as we can in our operations. And I know that we are a model of efficiency. But I think we need to be studying revenue when it comes to our parking lots, especially the big train station lot. And I think we should consider finding ways to invest more in our recreation, in particular facilities that improve the quality of life here. I don't want to see huge taxes. I don't want to see us have to do a ton of borrowing. However, if we are not offering more benefits, if it comes to the time when people are deciding which community they're going to be in, we don't want them to leave us.
Okay, thank you. This one's going to start with you, Ms. McCall. Would you support future mask mandates in the Hamlet?
That's kind of a wide open question. I would have to understand what the scenario is and why we're asking ourselves the question. Certainly, if the pandemic were to restart and we had the information saying that masks are the best protection we have and we don't have treatments or vaccines, in a situation like that, I would have an open mind, but I would likely support that. But again, it's a very broad hypothetical question, and I'm not sure that I can give you a great answer because it will really depend on why we're asking ourselves the question.
Okay, thank you. Same to you, Mr. Hildebrand.
I'll just assume part of your question is if things don't change dramatically. I mean, I think Holly's absolutely right. If facts change, then we have to adapt. Right now, or in any scenario close to right now, I absolutely would not support a mask mandate. I mean, our president said very recently the pandemic's over. I know people are obviously still getting COVID and still getting sick, and we need to be aware of that. But, you know, we've been 2+ years, 2.5 years since March of 2020 wrestling with the pandemic, and we now have a lot of information on negative consequences and derivative effects, most acutely with young people in this country. So for me, absolutely Holly's right. We have to adapt. We have to think about facts as they evolve, and if there's a new strain that takes on a more virulent and more potentially lethal form, we've got to be open-minded 100%. But given where we are now and in any scenario that, you know, is reasonably foreseeable, I think we have a sense now of what the negative consequences of some of the mandates have been, and I would be very hard pressed to support a mask mandate, absent, but again, a dramatic change in facts and circumstances.
Okay, thank you. This one goes to you, Mr. Hildebrand. What impact can our town board have on climate change and other environmental issues?
I'm going to answer the very specific question, what impact can we have? Sadly, very little. That's just the reality. Our federal government and frankly governments around the world have done woefully little to curb what we now know are the very real consequences of climate change. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do our part. You know, at a recent board meeting a few months ago, you know, my colleague on the board, Councilman Salan, said, you know, every penny matters. You know, and I agree with that in theory, but you know, we have to balance certain issues here in our town. I was happy to support the stretch code earlier this year, but after considered analysis of it, things changed between when that first stretch code was passed last fall and when we were forced to revisit it this spring. And I wanted to make sure we did our duty in considering that, and in the end, I was very happy to support it. I think that we have climate smart certification, which is due to the incredible work of our Sustainability Advisory Board. You know, they're a font of information like I just can't even believe. The Conservation Board has people who are incredibly proficient and knowledgeable about issues regarding plant and invasive species management, and I'm happy that as a town board, we adopted a property maintenance code that included specific provision encouraging property management that will promote environmentally healthy and safe property management. So those are the things we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McCall?
Thank you. So Chris is right. A lot of this is gonna have to be driven at our federal level. However, I disagree. I think there are a lot of things we can do locally. First of all, I think we can support the Environmental Bond Act. Your ballot over, vote yes. I think we can encourage our residents to choose more sustainable sources of energy. I think the Open Space Preservation Fund that the town board is currently contemplating, I think going ahead with that to ensure there are more trees to help filter our air. I think the town can electrify the vehicle fleet and the maintenance equipment. I think we should be encouraging any new housing or new development within our already built environments where we have asphalt and we're not taking down trees or taking away green spaces to do that. I also think that we can expand our food scrap waste program. I would love to just take that to the bottom of the driveway instead of to the recycling center. And probably one of the biggest things we could do as a community when it comes to affecting the environment in our air and reducing emissions is to work with the school district and the Chappaqua Transportation Company and have electric buses and fewer, maybe ideally none, of the diesel buses driving our children around town.
Okay, thank you very much.
May I use my second rebuttal?
Yes.
Thank you. So thanks, Holly, for pointing out a number of things that the town board has done or is doing. So I'm glad we're in agreement there. We are about to support the environmental bond. We've done, I think, great advocacy with regard to the airport, which is probably the single biggest local area of environmental concern. We've taken the Monarch Pledge, moved Chappaqua toward being B city status, and we have encouraged residents to be prudent with property management. Again, the property maintenance code, and finally the Open Space Reserve Fund, which is something that we're pushing for. So thank you.
Okay, here we go. And this is to you, Ms. McCall.
Thanks.
Do you believe that local elected offices can have an impact on major societal issues such as women's rights, LGBTQIA+ issues, and BIPOC BIPOC concerns?
Repeat the beginning of that question. I'm sorry, it was
No
hard to hear
worries.
you.
Do you believe that local elected offices can have an impact on major societal issues such as women's rights, LGBTQIA+
Thank you.
and BIPOC?
The short answer is yes. I think that the leadership in your community, their values say a lot. Who they support and what view they look at town policy and hiring. It all matters for them to demonstrate their values on a daily basis. There are committees that can be formed, there are facilities that can be expanded, there are plenty of things that you can do on a local level within your town, but also using your platform and your voice to affect the state level, the federal level. There's influence, just like we do when we advocate for the airport. We can do the same for human rights, women's rights, disability rights, and on down the list.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hildenbrand.
Sure, absolutely. And I think, as I mentioned before, where we have the ability to use our voice to have an impact in these debates, where these issues affect Newcastle residents, and again, we can be effective in advocating, we absolutely should. I think on a local level, one of the first things our town board did this year was to make sure we had a full seated committee on race equity, and we renamed it Race Equity and Inclusion, because we think Chappaqua needs to focus on inclusion. We want to make sure that all residents feel that they're welcome regardless of their background. We all lived through the torment of 2020 nationally, and we had our own version here in Newcastle, which was so disheartening. And I think the Council on Race and Equity did yeoman's work in analyzing and understanding the history of Newcastle and things we could do to make it better for all populations. And I think by seating the CREI and finding 7 incredibly talented and diverse volunteer members, we can move that issue forward. We also formed an LGBTQIA+ committee earlier this year, which was something that frankly was missing in our community, and will allow, again, a different component of our residents to have their voices heard. So I think there's absolutely a way for us to have an impact locally, and then again, where we have the ability to use our voices, we should advocate absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I use a rebuttal?
Yes, you may.
So I just wanted to clarify something. My understanding was that there were 10 spots for the CREI and it's not fully seated and a number of applicants were not chosen. But I am glad that the committee is up and running now.
Okay, thank you very much. This question goes to you, Mr. Hildenbrand. Will you engage with your constituents, including those who may not share your party affiliation or your political views?
I will engage with them the way I have since I started campaigning last fall. I could care less about someone's political views outside of how they think about Newcastle. To me, the term Unite Newcastle, someone asked me the other day where that came from. And the fact is last year, again, we had a transformational issue in our town that brought people from every background, politically, every background in terms of race and ethnicity, new residents, multi-generation residents, immigrants, across the board. And so to me, that's what that means, Unite Newcastle, and I'm here to serve all residents of Newcastle. I try to avoid as much as I can descending into the muck on Facebook debates. I think it debases all of us, and I wish that we did a better job of that. I'm very open with residents. If they have questions, they know how to reach me by email. I think I've been very respectful at town board meetings, and I think that is an example. I hope we all set, and I think frankly our town board has done a great job of that across the board. So to me, that's really the way I think about that. I'm here to represent all 18,000 residents, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of their views on anything outside of Newcastle.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McCall.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say that I disagree with anything when it comes to listening to all residents, being open to all feedback. Absolutely, just like I did when I was on the Board of Education, I will listen to every one of my constituents. And I will listen with an open mind. Your party doesn't matter to me when I'm representing you. Your party doesn't matter to me when you're voting for me either, to be honest. Although I am affiliated with the party, obviously. I would continue to be open and welcoming to anyone who wanted to tell me anything, just like I am through the entire campaigning process. This has been 3 years on the school board and then about 2 years of campaigning constantly. I have been listening to a lot of people, and I will absolutely continue to do that. One specific thing I would say, beyond being accessible by email and avoiding getting into conversations and debates on Facebook, I still would want to be aware of the conversations that are happening, and I would make myself available for open office hours with designated times where people can just find me.
Okay, thank you. This is our last question. And it goes to you, Ms. McCall. What can be done in Newcastle about the divisiveness that is pervasive in our local elections? And what is the role of partisan politics in local elections?
It's an interesting question. I think that this is something we need to address as a community. We just all need to own our own behavior and make sure that we are remembering that we're still gonna see each other at the grocery store, we're gonna see each other at the park. We live together and our community is a type of family. So we all need to take the time to think about how we're interacting. I think the internet makes it a little bit too easy to be anonymous and say things that we might not say to someone's face. And I think that we all have a responsibility to do that. And I think that as leaders of the community, we have a responsibility to embody the same behavior. So having patience with our community members who are coming to make comments, especially if we don't want to hear them, making ourselves accessible at all times. And then when it comes to the question specifically of party in local elections, party indicates your values. It's kind of a shortcut. So I think that from that perspective, it plays a pretty important role to people who don't have as much time to sit and watch events like this or spend as much time talking to me at the farmer's market, that the D means something about what I stand for.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Elder.
So probably not surprising, I think party affiliation by and large should be ignored in local politics. I think we have enough divide and division on a national and state level that by and large on a local level it should be issue-based, it should be about capabilities, it should be about qualifications. Our board is comprised of entirely registered Democrats, but Unite Newcastle ran as independents last year, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to do it again this year. I think that divisiveness is definitely the responsibility of each of us on the board and each of us who run for office. But we also need to understand, with whom we associate. I think some of the things we've seen recently, to me, go well beyond the pale. We all understand the normal give and take and hardball things that happen in politics, who shook hands with whom or which photo was unattractive. But when we start to get into false accusations and fake claims and ethics investigations and things like that, that's below the pale and it hurts. It hurts on a human level. We're all neighbors, we're all colleagues in some cases, we all coach together, we volunteer together, our kids have play dates together. And so when you embrace that kind of thing in a campaign, I think that that's toxic and I think it has no place in our community.
Okay, thank you very much. So now it's time for the closing statement. Each candidate will have a minute and a half. We're gonna do the closing statements in the reverse of the opening statement. So that means Mr. Hildenbrand, you open the closing statements.
Thanks to everyone who attended tonight, who watched at home on Zoom and who will watch in the future. Thanks again to the league for hosting a great event. Thanks for Ryan for the timekeeping and thanks Mr. Moderator. And thanks again and best of luck to Holly. As I think you saw tonight, there are some real differences between us, both in terms of our views as expressed tonight, but also in our record, certainly over the last 18 months. As Holly herself said, she opposes incremental change. The form-based code last year was about transformational change. And despite what she said this evening, she embraced it. She was silent this spring when residents of the community top to bottom were expressing their concerns about ADU and TOD legislation. She mentioned she didn't have a platform for that, but I think her campaign has been, up and running since that time, and certainly there were opportunities to speak your voice. I'm focused entirely on Newcastle, not outside party agendas or platforms. And while we generally agree on many points, I believe my experience both on the town board and throughout my career provide a unique perspective and platform from which I can continue to help Newcastle forward. To be clear, in the final analysis, our town's gonna be in great hands. We have an amazing and incredibly talented staff, highly competent, and most importantly, decent group of people on the town board. And whatever happens, I'm confident Newcastle will continue to be the wonderful and welcoming community we all know and love. So I wanna wish Holly the best of luck. I wanna thank everyone for being here. Again, whether you support me or Holly, it's so critical that we have engaged and interested residents. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McCall.
Thank you, I appreciate your graciousness and I'm glad that we were able to have a common issues focused forum tonight. And thank you to everyone who's been here, who's watching on video, to Mr. Hustle and Ryan for facilitating as well as the League of Women Voters. You've heard two very different perspectives, and that's why this conversation is so important. I just want to assure everyone that despite what might be said, I think for myself, my values are my values and they guide me. But this is a critical time when we're thinking about what the future of our community is going to look like. So I want to just reiterate my core values of transparency, accountability, and commitment are how I will operate on the town board. I have a vision for transparency and accountability, plans, a vision for our families and indeed every resident to feel part of local government and the community. And I do not exactly oppose incremental change, but I think that you still need to be working towards something. So again, a vision for planning, action, and investing in our beloved Newcastle. So, two different visions, and I look forward to continuing these open and honest discussions. And thank you for having us here tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to Dr. Cameron from the audience. I remind you that this is videotaped and will be available to you until election day. I also want to remind you of the unique and important role played by the League of Women Voters here in the community and all across the country. The League works registering voters, educating voters, and also protecting their rights to vote. It's vital to the strength of our democracy. Your local league is made up of volunteers who devote their time and energy, and your participation and assistance is always welcome, and your financial contributions will be appreciated. Democracy is not a spectator sport. That's one of the league slogans, and I encourage everyone to vote. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, John, for your excellent efforts keeping this forum running smoothly. Thanks also to Disability Rights New York for their ASL and closed captioning services. I want to thank both candidates for taking the time to share their views with our community. We hope that all community members will exercise their right to vote this election season, which begins with early voting on Saturday, October 29th, running through Election Day on Tuesday, November 8th from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. You can find information about your ballot, registration status, and polling places by visiting 411.org. Thank you and good night.